Since ancient times, people have always believed that the Earth was a bright, blue, and peaceful place, but in reality, it was nothing like that. In a city, a rocket was launched, soaring straight into the sky. Years later, Daichai woke up in his bed. Someone stood outside knocking on his door, calling him to get up. Today was the last day of the first semester of his second year of high school, and starting tomorrow, summer break would begin. His teacher questioned why Daichai's grades had plummeted so drastically. He made excuses, claiming he had been spending too much time playing around in his room, when the truth was that Daichai had been reading books and playing online games all along. The teacher, far from lenient, had to give him a stern warning. When the teacher mentioned his father, the person accompanying Daichai immediately showed displeasure and stressed that it was irrelevant. Daichai himself also realized that his way of living was wrong. He often skipped school to hide away at the game center. That day, Kagawa suddenly approached and complimented him. He invited Daichai to come hang out at his house. The moment they stepped inside, Sasaki and Aizawa were already there waiting. Daichai and Sasaki quickly got into a round of gaming. She was deeply impressed by his skills and showered him with endless praise. Behind them, Aizawa hinted to Kagawa that they should invite Daichai to come along. If they did, then Ayano would surely join too. Kagawa then extended the invitation for Daichai to come to a villa in Izu. Seeing Daichai hesitate, Aizawa assumed it was because he was afraid of his father. Kagawa, sitting beside him, then revealed a truth. Daichai's father had once been an astronaut, but sadly, he had also passed away. Right at that moment, a news report appeared on the television. Footage captured by a local resident showed a mysterious rainbow ring appearing in the sky above Minamitane and Tanegashima. Memories flooded back into Daichai's mind. Then he grabbed his bag, stood up, and declined their invitation. When he was little, Daichai had wandered into the forest to a hidden base. On the other side, Teppei greeted him and curiously asked about what he was wearing around his neck. Daichai held up the pendant and proudly showed it off, saying it was a gift from his father. Teppei admired how beautiful it was, yet he did not even know what the word father meant. Back in the present, Daichai stood by the riverbank, his heart heavy with thought. At another facility, they too were monitoring the rainbow ring. Suddenly, an engineer informed Moko that she was officially cleared to pilot Machine Goodfellow starting tomorrow. In the research lab, everyone was examining Teppei's body temperature. They speculated that the rainbow phenomenon was caused by him. Two of them stated with absolute certainty that Teppei was an avatar. Around his neck, he wore the very necklace Daichai had given him long ago. The next day, Daichai sat on a boat heading out to sea. Everyone on board kept talking about the strange phenomenon that had occurred. Daichai had witnessed it before. When he was young, while playing with Teppei, he had decided to give him his necklace. Teppei promised that if Daichai ever surprised him, he would return it. That afternoon, the two of them sat together watching the sunset. Daichai turned to introduce himself by name. Teppei wanted to show Daichai something extraordinary. Right after that, he summoned the rainbow ring for Daichai to see. Today, Daichai rowed the boat back to this island. He arrived at a grave where his uncle was already waiting. His uncle gave Daichai a few parting words before turning to leave. Suddenly, Daichai asked whether his father had truly died in an accident. Back then, inside the rocket, his father had been absolutely resolute in his decision. The rocket had soared straight into the sky, but tragically, it exploded in outer space. Since his father's death, Daichai had never returned to this island. He walked to the place where he and Teppei used to play. That night, Daichai decided to follow along and explore. Some areas inside were pitch dark. After pushing through the darkness, Daichai met that girl. She had never woken up until they touched the orb outside. A surge of power burst outward. The girl finally awakened and followed them out. But in the end, the three of them were discovered, and from that point on, they could never meet again. Now Daichai walked back into that same room from years ago. Elsewhere, they were activating Machine Goodfellow. Everyone scrambled urgently to find a way to stop it, while Daichai was heading deeper underground with a young girl. She showed him a terrifying image. Daichai collapsed to the ground in horror. It was the image of Machine Goodfellow charging forward to attack. He sprang to his feet, quickly sensing the danger. While Daichai stood paralyzed, not knowing what to do, the girl placed a gun in his hand. When he opened his eyes, Daichai found himself inside the research facility. Seeing the weapon in his hand, the scientist grew suspicious. That Daichai was the captain meant nothing to him. All Daichai wanted was to find a way to stop Machine Goodfellow. The gun in his hand blazed with light. Everyone else was also deploying countermeasures. A massive rocket was launched into the sky. Once in space, a giant mecha burst forth. The readings inside were being continuously adjusted. The person inside it at that very moment was none other than Daichai himself. Moko opened a hatch, spotted the mecha ahead, and grew excited. She unleashed a barrage of fire straight at Daichai. His uncle on Earth felt overwhelmed with worry, unable to understand why Daichai was the one inside that machine. The scanning system was still offline. Peter tried to establish contact with Daichai in outer space. Code suddenly spoke up, requesting to borrow the communication line to connect. Out in space, Daichai heard her voice. Code reminded him of how dire his situation was. He fully grasped the danger if Machine Goodfellow reached Earth. She informed him that the mecha was now fully charged with energy. Hearing that he did not know how to pilot the mecha, Code decided to take control herself. Moko continued firing, but the mecha now dodged her shots with ease. The shoulder panels opened up to return fire, yet they were still too slow compared to Moko's speed. She launched a devastating punch forward, and an unexpected explosion erupted across the void of space. Code tried to take aim but still could not land a hit. Daichai took yet another shot. After this hit, memories of his father rushed back to him. Daichai truly did not want to die here. Then, to Code's astonishment, he seized the controls himself. Daichai dodged incoming fire while charging straight toward Moko. He threw a powerful punch right into the heart of her machine. Immediately after, the machine exploded in the middle of space. Even Code could not help but praise him. Peter apologized for bringing Code in without authorization. After confirming Daichai's destination, she swiftly set the return course to Tanegashima on autopilot. The area around the airfield had already been secured. The operation was ordered to commence immediately. A short while later, Daichai finally touched down. His uncle came forward and asked directly whether he was the Earth driver. Afterward, Daichai was taken to headquarters for examination. The Livelaster, the device used to pilot the mecha, was carefully stored away. This was only the second one ever found. Hana and Teppei sat facing each other, fitted with headphones. By now, Teppei's fever had subsided. The supervisor demanded that Teppei take responsibility for the rainbow phenomenon. After the examination, Daichai stepped outside to speak with his uncle. His uncle explained the truth about Globe, the international organization. On the surface, it was an organization dedicated to the peaceful development of space. But in reality, it was a defense organization created to fight against alien invaders. His uncle reminded him that this was classified information. Daichai tensely tried to ask about his father's death. His uncle walked away without answering the question. Instead, he asked where Daichai had obtained that gun. Daichai, confused, recounted what had happened. His uncle then returned to him the boomerang from his childhood. The two of them walked past the room where Teppei and Hana were being held. Daichai recognized them both at once. His uncle stormed off in visible frustration. He marched in and confronted the staff about using the lead gear. One of them, seething with anger, emphasized that Teppei had used his supernatural abilities without permission. Daichai cheerfully walked in and greeted Teppei with warmth. Seeing Hana, he quickly recognized her as well. His uncle demanded answers, as he had forbidden them from using the lead gear. The other man insisted that Salty Dog did not need Globe's approval, as they were the internal security force. Daichai ignored everyone and quickly pulled his two friends away to go have fun. Suddenly, a warning signal went off. Hana dropped to the ground, clutching her ears, her face twisted in agony. Only after a while did the man press the button to stop it. Daichai looked at Hana, overwhelmed with worry. Back in the room, the man promised he would not let anyone touch her. Meanwhile, Globe was discussing Daichai's case. They finally reached a conclusion. The Livelaster had used Daichai to activate the Earth engine. On the other side, Machine Goodfellow was being upgraded. They planned to invest more heavily in defensive equipment. Amara asked Moko about the form of the Earth engine. Right after, he pulled her into a deep kiss. Through this, Amara was able to extract images from her memories. Cube stepped forward to ask the machine about the probability of the revolution's success. It immediately returned a figure of 100%. Elsewhere, Peter was calling Daichai to remind him about his behavior. He stressed that Hana was the one who had brought the gun to Daichai, but she could not fire it herself. That was why they had trained Teppei to shoot in her place. The supervisor questioned where Daichai had intended to take the two of them the day before. He honestly recounted the story from his childhood and the promise he had made. Daichai then asked why they had suddenly been in pain. The man explained about the lead gear device and insisted that Daichai wear one as well. Daichai stood up and promised to meet his two friends at the beach. The moment he stepped outside, the lead gear switched to alert mode. Daichai clutched his head, the searing sensation unbearable. He cried out and raised his hand high, summoning the gun. Without hesitation, Daichai fired straight at the headquarters. Teppei and Hana also tore off their lead gear. She called out to Pitts, who climbed onto her hand. The man reacted sharply, leaping to his feet in outrage, but Pitts scrambled onto him, causing him to panic and fall over. And so, the three friends met at the beach and played boomerang together. Akari stood with her hands clasped together, praying inside a small shrine. When she finished, she suddenly noticed Pitts outside. Akari reached into her backpack, pulled out some chestnuts, and offered them. Pitts scurried over, snatched them up, and quickly darted away. After his unauthorized actions, Daichai had been handcuffed. His uncle opened the room and brought Daichai before the supervisor, who wanted to force them all to wear a new control device. However, his uncle chose to remove Daichai's handcuffs instead. He wanted to make amends for the mistakes of the past. A moment later, Akari walked in, catching his uncle completely off guard. She was his daughter, and after his divorce, Akari had been living with her mother. The instant Daichai saw her, he recognized her right away. Surprisingly, Akari was also code. She was an extraordinarily talented hacker. Peter had devised a plan to collaborate with her. She sat down and began telling the story of her family. Akari started revealing her father's embarrassing secrets, leaving him flustered and scrambling to explain. The staff also lost all respect for the image of their boss. A while later, Teppei and Hana came out of a supermarket accompanied by his uncle. He apologized to both of them for having kept them locked up all that time. He also agreed to let Peter recruit Akari. His only condition was that the four of them would stay at his place. Akari and Daichai cleaned up his uncle's house together. She spotted a childhood photo of him posing with his uncle and his father. Uncle Tsutomu and Daichai's father had been close friends. Daichai also noticed a childhood photo of Akari with his uncle nearby. Right then, Tsutomu arrived home. Daichai went into the kitchen and showed off his cooking skills for everyone. During the meal, his uncle reminded the four of them to be mindful and careful, since they were of different genders and still at that sensitive age. Right at that moment, Hana stepped out of the bathroom completely undressed, innocently asking where the switch was, leaving everyone flustered. That evening, back in her room, Hana buried her face in the pillows, delighting in the scent. When Pitts rolled in through the window, Akari recognized it immediately. It quickly scampered over to play with her too. Hana sat up, surprised to see that Akari also knew Pitts. Akari then told her about what had happened that morning at the mountain shrine. In the other room, Teppei and Daichai lay out on the balcony, gazing together at the Milky Way above. Teppei showed him the rainbow ring once more. He said that Daichai always managed to surprise him. Teppei then returned the childhood necklace to Daichai. At that moment, Tsutomu was on the phone with Peter, insisting that he could not allow Daichai to continue carrying out missions. At the supervisor's office, new information had arrived. They desperately needed Hana for their faction's Grand Fleet. They also demanded that the supervisor deal with Daichai. The new machine being deployed this time would be piloted by Amara. Everyone immediately fell into panic. Meanwhile, Daichai was stuck in his room having to write a report, though he had no idea how to even begin. Just then, the supervisor walked in, wanting Daichai to know what had happened in the past. In the control room, Tsutomu recognized Amara's type of mecha, the very same kind that had appeared 9 years ago. The Earth engine was swiftly activated. The rocket was launched, soaring into the sky. Tsutomu was furious to see that Daichai was once again at the controls. The supervisor entered with a sinister smile. Earlier, he had opened his computer to show Daichai something. Suddenly, someone called in with a sharp reprimand. Besides replacing the armor plating, they had done no maintenance whatsoever. Tsutomu, enraged, issued an order banning Salty Dog from the control room. The supervisor walked away, convinced that Daichai was as good as dead. In another room, Pitts whispered something to Hana. She sprang to her feet, her face stricken with worry. The operators suddenly reported a malfunction in one of the systems. Akari was also struggling with the controls. After a tense moment, they finally managed to connect to the interception system. Everyone was astonished by Akari's capabilities. She had extensive experience in this field. Elsewhere, Hana began to sing aloud. The entire globe headquarters shook violently. Suddenly, a piece of equipment vanished. Tsutomu shouted desperately, trying to re-establish contact with Daichai. It turned out he now knew the truth from 9 years ago. His father had flown out to stop that very thing. So now Daichai was filled with fierce determination, resolved to stop it himself. He pushed forward with everything he had, but his speed was still far too slow. Amara effortlessly dodged every volley of fire and closed in. He slammed down from above, sending Daichai plummeting. Amara moved to pursue, seizing the chance to finish him off. Suddenly, a brilliant light appeared. Amara pulled back immediately, recognizing it as a planetary sign. A colossal entity materialized, standing as a shield before Daichai. It dispatched Amara's mecha with its bare hands. The machine exploded in midair. The entity turned and projected the rainbow ring for Daichai to see. He instantly realized it was Teppei. The cockpit opened, and Teppei returned to headquarters. When everyone asked Hana if she was responsible, she insisted that she had only been singing. Amara returned to base and announced that something terrible was about to happen. Summer break had finally arrived. Akari and Daichai sat on the porch eating watermelon. Suddenly, Pitts dashed out from inside. Akari offered it some watermelon seeds, but Pitts just kept rolling around restlessly. She guessed it was worried about Hana. Not just Pitts, but Daichai was also deeply concerned about her. Seeing him looking so gloomy, Akari lifted her shirt up. She wanted to use her belly button trick to cheer Daichai up. Akari put her hands on her hips, ready to charge in there with him. At that moment, Hana was undergoing a physical examination. Her body contained types of organelles that differed from theirs. After a while, Hana was removed from the scanning machine. Tsutomu stepped into the room and received Teppei's mental and forensic psychological evaluation results. Teppei was being kept alone in a separate room. The machine Goodfellow that Teppei had piloted the day before had been taken from a corporation called Macbeth during the Kanda incident. They had already identified the purpose behind this company's robot production. Peter speculated that the one who originally controlled it was not Teppei. He suspected Teppei was a Type 3, currently adrift in the Alpha Sector. But Teppei remained silent and gave no answer. Tsutomu sympathized deeply with how the boy felt. She stressed that this had become a serious threat. He closed his eyes and made his decision. Until they had more information, this would remain top secret. At the harbor, Moko was selling crepes from a truck. Just then, Daichai and Akari walked by and heard her calling out to customers. He excitedly ordered a serving of dumplings. Akari showed her displeasure at Moko's outfit. Afterward, they quickly headed to headquarters. Hana was undergoing examination at the medical center. When Daichai asked about Teppei, everyone fell silent. But Akari called out loudly and managed to get the answer. Tsutomu gave in and told everyone to come along. When they arrived, Daichai quietly sat down beside Teppei. Teppei summoned the rainbow ring and confessed. As a child, he had been so proud of his ability to create it. But now he felt utterly lost. Daichai did not care about any of that and simply thanked Teppei for saving him. He handed the necklace back to Teppei. Meanwhile, the two intruders' crepe truck tried to enter the base, but the guards quickly refused them entry since they had no business permit. Another guard was monitoring the security cameras inside his booth. But when he turned around, two figures were already standing behind him. Moko smiled and knocked out every guard at the post. She then swiftly infiltrated the computer system. Akari detected that their system had been hacked. She announced that the fortress defense system had been shut down. Suddenly, a massive tremor shook the facility. Someone cried out in alarm that something had happened in Sector C. Peter immediately deduced that the target was Teppei. Tsutomu called Rita and Thunder to follow him and investigate. The room was now in ruins, filled with smoke and debris. Teppei slowly rose from the ground. Two figures had already been standing there. They quickly demanded to know his identity. At that very moment, Tsutomu and the others burst in with guns drawn. But the intruders were armed as well. Blood was streaming down Daichai's head, though fortunately he could still sit up. Tsutomu demanded to know who the two strangers were. Suddenly, the camera above flickered back to life. Amara quickly realized that the fortress defense system had been reactivated. The turret fired directly between the two intruders. They leaped apart to dodge. Thunder rushed to Teppei's side, while Rita ran over to encourage the exhausted Daichai. The two intruders sprinted to the crepe truck and made their escape. Military vehicles gave chase, but the truck turned out to be a mobile weapon platform. When its roof opened, a mecha emerged. On Amara's command, it jumped out and trampled everything in its path. All resistance was crushed by the mecha. At that moment, Teppei appeared and demanded they stop. He was about to step forward when Daichai grabbed him and pulled him back. He insisted that Teppei belonged to Earth, alongside everyone else. A tremendous surge of power burst from Daichai's hand, and he summoned the gun. Amara immediately ordered the mecha to charge. Daichai raised the gun and opened fire straight at it. The two intruders had no choice but to retreat. Teppei quickly caught Daichai as he collapsed. On the way back, Moko worried that Teppei would betray them. But Amara stated with certainty that it would never happen. He emphasized that the sensation of being a kill T-gang was something Teppei could never give up. Back at the base, the scene was one of utter devastation. Once they reached the main office, everyone recounted Akari's heroics, but she had already gone home, exhausted. Daichai was told he would have to stay in the hospital for a few days due to his head injury. Hana sat beside him and reminded him to get a thorough checkup. When Pitts appeared, someone warned that pets were not allowed in the hospital. Hana proudly announced that Akari had taught her a special move to make Daichai feel better. The moment he heard that, Daichai realized what was coming, but could not stop her in time. She stood up and lifted her skirt, performing the belly button trick. The two of them panicked and covered their faces. The doctor came out and called for Teppei, saying Tsutomu needed to see him. Teppei went downstairs, his mood turning dark. Hana appeared behind him, sensing his emotions. After mustering his courage, Teppei asked her one question. Did Hana know that Machine Goodfellow had been operating independently with Orgon energy? He feared that he might become their enemy. But she reassured him of one thing: Teppei would save Daichai. He still feared he could turn into a different person. Afterward, Teppei drove away first. Tsutomu assigned him a mission to protect someone, a member selected for the Kavoto's plan. They were currently trying to capture this individual. Rita warned that the target was a convicted prisoner serving time for assault and attempted murder. He had been chosen for the project because of his genes. The criminal's name was Arashi. Teppei's designer child genes had been derived from his. Teppei understood that this mission would not take him into space. Tsutomu also decided to keep Teppei's secret from headquarters. Teppei understood that this was a top-secret assignment. He and Akari would be piloting the spacecraft. Peter knew they needed to find a way to get Teppei aboard the Tenkaido. Akari claimed she was tagging along because she wanted to see her mother. Rita felt the girl might truly mean it. She wondered why the enemy was targeting Arashi, since the recent battle had raised suspicion about Teppei's connection to the Kill T-gang. Because he was quarantined at the base, they could not reach him directly. Red Papillon approached the rendezvous point at the Tenkaido. The two of them changed clothes and stepped inside. Akari's mother had been waiting there, overjoyed to welcome her daughter. Seeing the bond between mother and daughter, Teppei felt a sense of unfamiliarity. He walked straight ahead and asked a woman about the origin of the shuttle he had spotted at the docking port. She explained it was a regular supply vessel. Teppei entered his room, his mind in turmoil. Akari appeared behind him, wanting to help. Teppei asked why she was not spending more time talking with her mother. But Akari found this far more interesting. The two of them took the elevator down together to the cryosleep ward of the Kavoto's plan, also known as the Grand Fleet Sector. This was a secret plan to escape Earth, reserved for a carefully chosen group of people. If word got out, it would certainly cause a riot. She checked the data and noticed that several notification systems in this sector had been disabled. Teppei immediately suspected that spies had already infiltrated. Akari spoke the access command and the compartment door opened. They quickly floated inside. She already knew about his mission. After a while, they reached the cryosleep chamber. Akari swiftly entered the passcode to open the door. She read out the pod identification number to bring it up. Seeing Arashi's face, Teppei fell deep into thought. Just then, Akari warned that intruders had entered the sector. Teppei quickly asked whether there was an emergency hatch nearby. After she confirmed, Teppei suggested that Akari could seal it without making any noise. She immediately got to work. Teppei decided to wake Arashi and then escape through the emergency exit at the back. By the time the spies reached the chamber, the door had already sealed shut just in time. Arashi woke up quickly. Teppei explained he had been awakened early for a reason outside the original plan. Arashi instantly recognized Teppei. He sat up and declared he had known who the boy was the moment he saw him. Akari hurried to open the rear exit for their escape. She knew the intruders would break through any moment. Arashi was sharp enough to guess that he was the target being hunted. By the time the pursuers reached the spot, the three of them had already escaped. One of them quickly found the route they had taken. But what they did not expect was that the three had hidden inside the frozen pods overhead. It was Arashi who had devised this plan. He rushed ahead of the other two. On the way out, Akari stumbled and Teppei caught her. This led Arashi to assume they were a couple. He kept addressing Teppei as his son. The title made Teppei uncomfortable. Suddenly, one of the pursuers opened fire on them repeatedly. The three decided to put on space suits to make their way out. When Teppei was shot, Arashi threw himself forward to shield him. Afterward, Akari helped bandage his wounds. Arashi deduced that the enemy had pinpointed their location. He rummaged through the attacker's bag and pulled out plastic explosives, intending to use them to steal the enemy's ship. But Teppei strongly objected to this plan. Arashi remained confident in his strategy. As they neared the shuttle, Teppei declared that he did not consider Arashi his father. Yet Arashi still pulled Teppei into an embrace. He spoke a sorrowful apology. But Teppei could not accept it. Arashi chose to surrender so he could protect the other two. Back on Earth, Tsutomu emphasized that Arashi's crime had been committed to protect Teppei. Arranging their meeting had been his uncle's intention all along. Soon the shuttle launched and flew away. Akari confessed to her mother, but her mother remained happy nonetheless. Upon returning to Earth, Teppei apologized to Tsutomu for failing the mission. But Tsutomu declared that their plan had actually succeeded. When the shuttle landed, Arashi had found a way to escape. Back home, Teppei lay awake, reflecting on everything that had happened that day. He arrived to inform Moko and Amara that the experiment had begun. The two pledged their full devotion to the Macbeth Corporation. The chairman departed, telling them to call him if they needed anything. Inside the elevator, his secretary reminded the chairman of something. He then decided to invite her to dinner that evening. At Globe headquarters, they suddenly received a call. Yamatsuri, Tsutomu's ex-wife, was asking about Arashi. He confirmed they still had not been able to find him. She also guessed that Tsutomu had been the one behind this. He quickly looked up, avoiding Yamatsuri's gaze. Suddenly Peter warned that the conversation was being hacked. Akari joined in, disappointed that she had been caught. She tattled about how Tsutomu had been flirting with Rita that morning. Akari then asked about the Kavoto's plan. Rita turned and explained that it was a plan to help humanity escape if the worst should happen. Tsutomu warned that if Akari learned any more, she would be detained. The moment she heard that, Akari dropped out of the call. Yamatsuri ordered everyone to simply monitor the situation for now. Daichai was currently training to pilot the Earth engine. He had already mastered the basic controls. Rita wanted him to go home and rest for the day, but he still had energy and wanted to keep training. She then pointed out that Hana was feeling very worried about him. When he returned, she was already standing there waiting. Meanwhile, the chairman was still scheming to annihilate all of humanity. He plotted to turn Earth into a planet of his own. Tsutomu went to visit Daichai's father's grave. Back then, his father had bravely sacrificed himself for a brighter future. As Tsutomu stood and turned to leave, Toshiaki approached from behind. At the shore, Hana and Daichai walked out to the beach. He asked her about the first time they had met. Hana nodded, reminiscing about that memory, recalling how she had said the word friend. Daichai then wondered what she had meant by it. Hana explained that she had been created to fire the Livelaster, but sadly, she could not use it. Long ago, Hana had lived in a world of complete darkness. The only thing she ever held in her hands was the Livelaster. Then a voice called out, urging her forward. She decided to grip their hands tightly and run toward the light. Hana explained that the bodies of the planetary gears were souls crystallized into digital form. On his end, Teppei was also explaining the same thing to Akari. He emphasized that as long as it was not destroyed, they would remain immortal forever. They had once believed that only they were truly human. Everyone else was nothing more than a tool. But Hana was different from the beings on Teppei's planet. She was simply a tool created to fire the Livelaster. Daichai insisted that she was not a tool but a human being. Hana lowered her head sadly and said they did not see it that way. He stepped closer and confidently declared that Teppei was nothing like them. Akari asked what the world looked like through Teppei's eyes. He quickly offered an analogy. Once all the water has been drunk and the bottle has served its purpose, the marble inside has nowhere left to go. He grew troubled, questioning whether eternal life was everlasting happiness or an eternal prison for the soul. Akari suddenly sat up, starving, and decided to go cook something delicious. On the other side, the secretary reminded the chairman that he had been sitting in the machine room for too long. He explained that it was his own personal sanctuary. Without his biometrics, no one could enter that room. But by that point, Moko had already managed to unlock it and get inside. Amara asked Pac whether Cube had figured out who they really were. Pac confirmed that the man only thought of himself, which narrowed his vision and made him easier to deal with. Moko expressed surprise that Pac was content with life here. Pack stated plainly that its only joy was being a useful tool for the planetary gears. Amara ordered the supervisor to prove that he was still of use. Hana's presence was vital to the Kavoto's plan. Toshiaki reminded Tsutomu that Daichai needed to be sent home immediately. Toshiaki was Daichai's biological uncle. Daichai walked straight over and asked Tsutomu for permission to explain things to his uncle himself. His uncle became furious upon learning that Daichai had been working there. The two then went into a room to talk privately. Toshiaki refused to let Daichai stay on this island. It was putting him in danger. Daichai was deeply grateful for his uncle's concern, but he also felt the same way Hana did. He felt as though he had been trapped in the city, always sensing that he did not belong there. Hana was dipping her feet into the water when Pitts suddenly came running from afar to warn her of danger. The supervisor approached with a gun aimed straight at Hana's face. Pitts quickly ran to alert Daichai. He chased after it to the harbor. Hana was being held tightly in the man's grip. Toshiaki followed behind, but was startled by a gunshot and fell to the ground. Daichai told his uncle not to come any closer. The man declared he was taking Hana away. Daichai immediately drew his gun and aimed it forward. The man sneered, telling Daichai he would never save anyone. Suddenly, Daichai pulled out his boomerang and hurled it straight into the man's face. He tumbled backward into the sea. Daichai rushed forward to catch Hana. Toshiaki was also helped to his feet by Tsutomu. Tsutomu himself had recognized an energy within Daichai that he had never seen before. Back at headquarters, Tsutomu showed Rita footage of the dark side of the moon, explaining that if the Kill T gang attacked, Earth would end up like that. The truth was that the Kavoto's plan was really about the annihilation of humanity. He had been the one to stand against it. Overcome with rage, Tsutomu slammed his fist down. Cube was still gleeful about being able to exploit everyone at Globe. Moko, meanwhile, was delighted to be exploiting him right back. At headquarters, everyone was examining a 10-year-old photograph of the Seton Research Institute in the Hawaiian Islands. They had discovered early on that despite being cleverly disguised, it was actually a subsidiary of the Macbeth Corporation. On the screen appeared the childhood faces of Moko and Amara. Tsutomu deduced that the two were designer children. They had been overseas during the Kanda incident. All 6-year-old children had been brought into the facility. Teppei was the only one who had gone missing. Just like him, the other children could all use Machine Goodfellow and transform into the Kill T gang. Their preparations were already complete. Tsutomu suggested launching attacks more frequently. Peter then reported that when Teppei transformed into the Kill T gang, Hana had been able to use the energy generated inside the bloom. Peter announced that the object had run out of energy and ceased all movement. He emphasized that they used Machine Goodfellow to transform into the Kill T gang in order to harvest the life energy of Earth's people, the human life force known as Orgon energy. Tsutomu instructed them not to report this to headquarters. Rita felt helpless, frustrated that such a grave danger could not be disclosed to the public. Tsutomu used an example to remind them that if it was a true threat, it absolutely had to remain secret. Hana and Daichai brought out watermelon for everyone to snack on. Akari was surprised it was watermelon again. Hana lowered her gaze sadly, knowing that these peaceful days would not last much longer. The expressions of the other two turned to shock. Hana explained that Pitts had told her so. Teppei also warned everyone that if even one Kill T gang reached Earth, all of humanity's life force would be drained completely. The first time Daichai had sensed their presence, he had already felt terrible. Teppei was also worried about the next time he transformed into the Kill T gang, uncertain whether he could still hold on to himself. Daichai also guessed that the planetary gears could not fire the Livelaster, which was why they had created Hana to do it. Suddenly Pitts appeared, running frantically around Hana. They all rushed to headquarters because of its warning. The galactic map appeared on screen and everyone grew tense. Rita sighed and wanted to call in the bomber squad. Hana tensely confirmed that they had not arrived yet. Tsutomu was informed that Daichai was already standing by in the Earth engine cockpit. Hearing that he had been properly trained, Peter quickly explained it had been a directive from headquarters. Daichai stressed that if he did not take them down, there would be no hope left. He told Tsutomu to begin the launch sequence. Amara could not believe that Teppei had betrayed them. He feared that one day they would no longer be immortal. And so Moko launched into space, preparing for battle. Tsutomu was amazed that Pitts had the ability to predict events by using Orgon energy. On Earth, the rocket was quickly launched. It separated, and Daichai piloted the Earth engine straight into open space. The moment he spotted the Kill T gang, he recognized it. This was the same one he had fought the first time. but he kept missing his initial target. Pitts warned Hana that Daichai was in danger. She tried to pull Teppei along to help, but he hesitated in fear. Teppei was afraid that if he transformed into the Kill Tea gang, he would lose himself. Akari suddenly slapped him hard across the face. That snapped him out of it, and he decided to go with Hana. Out in space, Amara also appeared. He joined the fight alongside Moko. Back at headquarters, Hana raised her voice in song. The entire building shook violently. Out in space, Daichai was desperately trying to escape the relentless pursuit of the two attackers. Akari warned him that close combat would be dangerous. Immediately after, Moko easily caught hold of Daichai. She did not hesitate to strike. At that critical moment, Teppei appeared and came to Daichai's rescue. Moko was furious to see that Teppei intended to betray them. Daichai charged forward, firing a relentless barrage at Amara, while Teppei flew off to deal with a stunned Moko. Amara roared in fury, vowing to devour everyone. He simultaneously tried to pull Teppei free from what was binding him to bring him back. With less experience, Teppei began to struggle. Amara called out to Moko to fire straight through him. She reminded Teppei that he could survive the blast, but Daichai was only human. Teppei flew straight in and absorbed the full force of Moko's attack. She froze in disbelief, realizing that Teppei's ego block had grown far too powerful, surpassing her own. A massive explosion erupted in space. Moko's machine Goodfellow shattered into pieces. Back at headquarters, everyone realized that Teppei had destroyed his own ego block. He was drifting in another dimension, sinking into darkness. Daichai kicked Amara hard to push him away. He also realized he did not have enough momentum to finish him off. Daichai grimaced, unsure of what to do. Akari helped him use a different weapon to attack. He quickly used it to deal with Amara. After a short while, Daichai claimed a decisive victory. Moko returned, overwhelmed with sorrow. At headquarters, Tsutomu was deeply worried about Teppei. Peter noted that Teppei's readings were now completely identical to an ordinary human's. The cockpit opened. Teppei woke up, and in his hand appeared a brand new live laster. Yamatsuri was surprised when Tsutomu cancelled the request for Akari to become a sleeper. Afterward, he spoke frankly with Peter. Tsutomu had reported to higher headquarters, and they agreed to keep the matter secret. He had also secured permission for Hana to remain. Rita had designed new uniforms for the 4 young members. Tsutomu stepped forward and declared that from now on, they would serve as Globe's independent strike force. Daichai was also officially appointed as the pilot of the Earth engine. Cube suspected they would attack again. Pac assumed he was beginning to develop fear. Cube's hands would not stop trembling. Pac assured him that everything was under his control. A repair technician informed the two that an excess of orgone energy had short-circuited the system. Another person speculated the cause was Amara having overexerted himself. Repairs would take approximately 2 weeks. The two went searching for other machine Goodfellows. Amara announced that Pac had provided them with data on the other 5. They wanted to reconnect with them as quickly as possible. The train car suddenly came to a stop. Daichai got dressed. Hana changed into a beautiful dress as Pitts scurried close. She relayed what it had told her. Tomorrow, there would be a surge of life force. Rita wondered why the enemy had not acted sooner. Peter offered his theory that they could not move because their machine Goodfellows had been disabled after the previous battle. Akari quickly analyzed the data to find a weakness. Teppei warned everyone that the enemy was trying to contact the remaining 5. Tsutomu was stunned to learn there were others. Daichai asked whether Teppei knew about the other designer children. Teppei stressed that they had all been kept isolated from one another. Just then, Akari informed everyone there were 2 males and 3 females. The enemy could sense where they were. Since Teppei's ego block had been destroyed, he could no longer sense them. Tsutomu announced that the Earth engine was undergoing repairs. Finally, he assigned them a mission. They had to prevent the others from becoming the Kill Tea gang. Their first operation would take place in Odaiba. Inside the train compartment, Rita came in to check on everyone. The 2 young men were now dressed sharply in formal suits. Hana seemed a bit uncomfortable in her outfit. Rita reminded them that a machine Goodfellow might appear tonight. She wanted to stop it before it could be activated. The staff still had doubts about the team's capabilities, but Peter expressed full confidence in them. After a while of searching around, Akari turned out to be hunting for pastries to enjoy. Rita's face fell, slightly worried about this mission. Shortly after, they all headed to the casino. Everyone wanted to take advantage of Pitts' abilities to make money, but Hana insisted that Pitts could not predict something like that. Someone stepped forward to remind them that minors were not allowed inside. Akari spun a story that got them through. A moment later, the manager came down and agreed to let them in. The young employee was named Zin. The manager approached and told him that a friend was waiting for him. Zin quickly recognized the girl as Nayako. After a while, Hana wondered where Teppei and Daichai had gone. Akari explained they were out searching for the machine Goodfellow on the commander's orders. While Daichai was searching, Amara suddenly appeared behind him. He confessed that he was the one who had killed Daichai's father. But Daichai had already known that for some time. Unable to provoke him, Amara abruptly drew his gun. Daichai quickly summoned his livelaster. But when he ran out, Amara had vanished. Only Teppei was visible in the distance, running toward him in alarm. He scolded Daichai with a few sharp words. On the other side, Amara warned Moko that the group was here. On the cable car, Zin and Nayako were riding together. She lowered her head in disappointment, feeling that he had changed. Nayako asked why Zin had dropped out of school. He began recalling a memory of a friend who had challenged him to see who could take a better photograph of Nayako. The photo Zin had taken was stolen by that very person. The rival also stole his prize. On top of that, Nayako had started dating the thief. Zin had all but given up on life and on himself. Nayako told him that Takao, the one who had stolen his work, had lost his inspiration and could no longer take good photographs. Lately, he was angry all the time. Nayako had also figured out that the award-winning photograph had actually been Zin's, yet he still chose to lie about it. Back at headquarters, Tsutomu acknowledged the accuracy of Pitz's prediction. Peter reminded everyone that Machine Goodfellow would be activated tonight. At the casino, the manager led Zin to meet the actual owner of the establishment. Inside, the man ordered the manager to leave. He praised Zin's talent and wanted the boy to follow his orders and bring money into the casino. Suddenly, a loud crash rang out. Amara and Moko had appeared. The man was swiftly eliminated by Amara. Moko cupped Zin's face and kissed him. His memories came flooding back in an instant. Moments later, Zin was already piloting his own Machine Goodfellow. Rita confirmed she had picked up the signal. Daichai launched himself forward. Amara also reported that they had been detected. Zin immediately went berserk, unleashing a hail of fire at Daichai. Daichai tried his best to aim carefully at the target. Akari also quickly deployed her secret weapon. They were shocked to discover that the attacker was Zin. Moko panicked when she realized their system was being hacked. Hana relayed the enemy's weak point to Daichai. Zin was caught off guard when his electronic displays malfunctioned. He tried using orgone energy to fight back, but he was not the only one who could wield it. Zin's machine was completely blown apart. Their mission was finally accomplished. Rita returned with an utterly smug and triumphant attitude. Daichai arrived at a location in the heart of Shinjuku. He understood the danger if Machine Goodfellow were activated here. Back at headquarters, Akari had uncovered the secret system schematics of the machine. Teppei deduced that orgone energy was essential for operating the Kill T gang. Rita explained that the energy emitted by the livelaster was the very same thing. On the other side, Moko had obtained information about Akari. Amara decided she would be their next target. The four of them stopped at a cafe for snacks. Another Machine Goodfellow was expected to appear nearby tonight. Teppei suggested they use the bus to pinpoint its location. Daichai stressed that they had only a narrow window to take it down. He worried about fighting in the middle of such a crowded city. Akari wanted to go buy a new computer since her old one had been damaged. Teppei wanted to accompany her but was turned down. He hung his head, feeling useless. At a concert hall, AI no longer wanted to sing. This infuriated her manager. She was terrified of being hated and had become consumed by self-doubt. On her way back, Akari heard someone calling from behind. When she turned around, it was Zin. Akari hurled her laptop into his face, knocking him down. She sprinted forward as fast as she could. After running for a while, Amara appeared and pressed a chloroform-soaked cloth over her mouth. Akari could not resist and crumpled to the ground. He lifted her up, pretending to be her boyfriend. Zin arrived carrying Akari's laptop bag. The manager grew worried as AI lost all her confidence. While she was in the restroom, Moko appeared. She grabbed AI and kissed her forcefully. Ai's lost memories instantly came flooding back. Rita informed the team that they could not reach Akari. She felt uneasy knowing the girl had gone out alone. Rita assumed for the moment that Akari had simply snuck off to have fun. On the other side, Akari suddenly opened her eyes and woke up. Dusk had fallen and Akari still had not returned, making everyone anxious. Rita warned that without Akari, the operation would suffer. Moko wanted Akari to help their side. When Akari refused to comply, Amara made her face bleed. AI then appeared inside a machine Goodfellow. Rita quickly alerted everyone. She nervously reminded Daichai that he could not reach such a distant location. On top of that, AI was operating as artillery. Seeing Rita still hesitating, Daichai called Teppei to provide support. Daichai was quickly launched skyward, but the distance indicator on the screen showed failure. Hana behind them still believed in him completely. Daichai jammed the Livelaster directly into the machine. Both sides unleashed fire at each other. Unfortunately, Daichai was hit by AI and sent plummeting from the sky. Zin called to remind AI that Daichai was behind the building. Akari helped them infiltrate Globe's system. All they needed was for AI to transform into the Kill T gang and victory would be theirs. Daichai remained resolute. Teppei rushed over and reminded him of what to watch for. Daichai nodded, fully understanding, and soared upward. AI fired a fierce barrage of artillery forward. At that moment, the Earth engine opened and Daichai fired the Livelaster directly. She remained supremely confident in her abilities. Yet Ai's machine Goodfellow had its head blown apart. Daichai hung his head, exhausted and worried, then let out a sigh of relief. Suddenly he looked up, remembering that Akari still had not come back. Seeing this battle lost, Amara conceived a new plan. He wanted Akari to make Globe's base self-destruct. He even drew his gun and aimed it at her provocatively. Amara pressed the barrel against Akari's temple and asked whether she could do it. On their end, Daichai received the report. Over 90% of the low-orbit impactors had lost connection. He guessed who was behind it. It could only be Akari. He asked once more for confirmation. Rita immediately confirmed it. Akari's skills and her knowledge of Globe's secrets had been turned against them by the enemy. She lowered her gaze, visibly sorrowful. Rita informed everyone that another team was trying to trace Akari's location through the system. The girl had evaded many servers, making her impossible to track. Hearing this, Teppei quickly took the blame upon himself. He felt deeply guilty for letting Akari go out alone. On her end, Akari was still typing away at the keyboard without pause. Growing impatient, Amara pressed his gun to her head again. She hung her head and confessed that she was deliberately not using her trump card, because she could only use it once. If she did, they would become guarded, so she had chosen not to deploy it. Akari raised her head and issued a warning to everyone. She had gained control of all nuclear warheads on the low-orbit impactors, as well as missiles across every nation on Earth. She demanded they release her. Otherwise, the entire planet would be reduced to rubble. Amara scoffed, refusing to believe it. Moko kissed Akari to verify, and to their shock, it was true. They had no choice but to let her go. Hana announced that Pitts only knew something would happen tonight, somewhere within this area. Tsutomu contacted them with a reminder to be careful. Akari still did not consider her own kidnapping a serious matter. Teppei hung his head, blaming himself. She immediately turned and dismissed that notion. Yet he remained deeply troubled by his mistake. Rita smiled, encouraging Teppei and urging him to complete the mission. If everything went well, their organization's strength would double. Bolstered by everyone's trust, Teppei regained his confidence. A car race had just ended, and Lin had taken first place. At the Coastal University, Ban spoke up with a question. The project was funded by someone named Robin, but no one knew who that person actually was. Dr. Marimura recounted that several years ago, she had been researching the use of transcranial magnetic stimulation to control the dreams of sleeping test subjects. Ban understood that if successful, the applications would be vast. Marimura emphasized that this very research had drawn Robin's interest in funding the project. Yet she still did not know Robin's true identity. Ban also figured out that the project's name meant Dream Installation. Just then, Lin walked in. She and Marimura were friends. Moko and Amara were hoping for a faster machine. Daichai and Hana were out for a walk together. She reached up to call Pitts down from above. When she stepped backward, she accidentally bumped into him. Daichai's necklace got caught on her dress. He fumbled, trying to untangle it without success, pulling Hana's face closer to his own. Right at that moment, he finally managed to free the chain. The two had barely separated when Akari walked up holding ice cream. She expressed concern about Teppei's state of mind. Daichai put his hands on his hips and reminded Akari to be careful. Over at the laboratory, Lin had been put under hypnosis. Marimura declared that the project's future depended heavily on Lin. She began giving Lin verbal guidance. Lin truly loved speed and the freedom it gave her. Suddenly, Moko and Amara appeared. Amara walked straight up and kissed Lin. Marimura was thrilled to see changes in Lin's brain activity. She realized the other two were also designer children. Ban stared at everyone in bewilderment, unable to grasp what was happening. The three of them left, leaving Marimura and Ban unconscious. They happened to encounter Daichai and wanted to eliminate him on the spot. The one assigned the task this time was Lin. A short while later, she stood beside Daichai, chatting inside an aquarium. Lin turned and expressed contempt for the humans of Earth. Suddenly, she drew her gun and fired straight at him. Daichai quickly ducked and ran. She chased him outside. After a moment, Daichai aimed his live blaster at the back of Lin's neck. He reminded her that he had been on the track team. He ordered her to raise her hands and surrender her weapon. Lin suddenly kicked him hard in the stomach. She said they would settle this later. That evening, she had a new machine with terrifying speed. Rita quickly informed everyone that they had identified the activation zone for Machine Goodfellow. She was startled to discover that this time it had appeared underwater. Daichai was quickly launched out. The moment he hit the water's surface, it exploded upward in a massive splash. This time, Daichai had to fight beneath the waves. Lin struck hard, cracking the Earth engine's hull. She became utterly arrogant, looking down on Daichai. Akari shouted a warning that time was running out. Daichai immediately unleashed his finishing blow on Lin's Machine Goodfellow. She remained calm, smiling confidently, convinced she had won. But then, right before everyone's eyes, Lin fled. She had achieved the speed she had always dreamed of and was overcome with exhilaration. Tsutomu was horrified that Daichai had let it escape. He ordered Teppei's inspection to be postponed, but Teppei had already prepared a plan. He declared he would not stop and would go after her. Tsutomu, alarmed, told him not to because the machine had not been tested yet. Teppei announced that it was no longer the Aramusha. It had become the Nebula Engine Ordinary. Peter then explained that he had been guiding Teppei beforehand. Teppei asked Tsutomu to let him go. He wanted to recapture Lin after her escape. Tsutomu ordered Daichai to command Teppei. Then he gave the order to launch the Nebula Engine. Teppei inserted his live blaster to activate it. The moment they met, Teppei recognized Lin. Her speed was overwhelming, and he was struck repeatedly. Lin declared that Teppei could never keep up with her. He closed his eyes and focused, trying to sense her position. Lin remained supremely confident. But in the end, the victor was Teppei. Peter smiled and praised the team. A man urged Setsuna to sing. After taking a deep breath, the girl began to sing. On her end, Marimura was analyzing Setsuna's brainwave patterns. The energy levels were climbing rapidly. They were awaiting the next generation of energy. Daichai returned to the office, where Akari reminded him that as captain, he could not keep relying on Rita. Daichai turned and apologized to Teppei. He handed the necklace back to him once more. Akari reminded everyone that only 2 designer children remained. Rita was heading to a bar. She presented her business card, relying on the bartender for help. Rita knew he had once been a detective. It turned out she was interested in the Kanda case. He had been part of the special unit assigned to it. At the time, the Macbeth Corporation had been developing a weapon. They had created 6 children through illegal genetic engineering. An anonymous informant had tipped off the police. Macbeth was placed under investigation. The 6 children were found by police and taken away. The head of the corporation, upon discovering the raid, had taken his own life. Rita asked why the detective had left the unit. She wanted to know what had happened to the 6 children. Hana and Akari went to a swimming pool together. Akari was thrilled, imagining all the men staring at her. But the one actually drawing attention was Hana. Hana suddenly noticed Setsuna in the pool. The bartender truly knew nothing about the 6 children. All records pertaining to them had been destroyed. He confessed that he had gone searching for them on his own. The bartender felt worried about their safety. Over at the Macbeth Corporation, Cube suddenly spoke up, wondering whether Pac was capable of killing. Pac emphasized that the weapons it had designed certainly could. Pac affirmed that it existed for one reason alone, to do its job. Cube trusted that Pac was not lying. Moko was feeling deeply sorrowful. Amara was eagerly anticipating Setsuna's awakening. Once she did, they would be able to create new capsules together. Setsuna walked over and asked about the empty seat next to the 2 girls. Akari even passed a drink over to her. Hana's Pits was already playing with Setsuna's Lappa. Marimura was excited that the project had reached its final phase. Per the contract, she could not let Ban observe the experiment. He worried about whether Marimura could manage on her own. After Ban left, Setsuna returned. Suddenly, Marimura reminded her that it was time for her checkup. She told Setsuna to sit in the machine. Elsewhere, Daichai and Teppei were walking together. Daichai told him what Akari had discovered. The research group was connected to the Macbeth Corporation. Unfortunately, when they turned around, they came face to face with Moko and Amara. The two opened fire immediately. Luckily, Daichai and Teppei managed to leap aside in time. They pressed their backs together and summoned their livelasters. Daichai instantly guessed that their friend's target was somewhere nearby. Teppei thought that person might not have awakened yet. Teppei warned Daichai that if one of them kissed him, his thoughts could be read or telepathically intercepted. On the other side, Setsuna had finally been placed inside the designated machine. Marimura let out a deeply satisfied laugh. She approached and suddenly kissed Setsuna. The girl's eyes flew open in shock. It turned out that Marimura had been orchestrating a sinister plot all along. She had theorized that if the designer children were not meant to be pilots for new weapons, they could instead serve as vessels for implanting human consciousness. An idea had taken root in Marimura's mind, to transfer her own mind into a younger body. But suddenly, Setsuna awakened and shoved her backward with force. Marimura crashed to the floor in disbelief. She wondered what Setsuna had just seen. The girl had realized that Marimura had raised her only to use her as a vessel. Setsuna shook her head, overwhelmed by disappointment and rage. She bolted out of the room. Marimura chased after her, but the door swung open and slammed straight into her face. She crumpled to the ground. A moment later, a familiar face appeared. It was none other than Ban, holding a gun in his hand. His expression had turned dark and menacing. Above, Amara was perched on a high branch, watching them. Teppei spun around and shouted a warning to Daichai. Amara despised him and wanted to eliminate Daichai first. He opened fire relentlessly. Fortunately, Teppei generated a shield to protect Daichai. The two of them then made their way inside the laboratory. Moko circled the area, examining the scene. She reported that the place had been cleaned out. However, someone had bled here. Fortunately, it was not Setsuna's blood. It turned out that Ban was an agent working for Robin. They had already moved the install device. A girl suddenly sat up in bed after a nightmare. Rita returned and reported that she had done her best to track down the designer children, but still could not determine their current whereabouts. In the end, they had no choice but to rely on Pitz's abilities. Teppei, still awake, suddenly spoke up. He reminded everyone that during the last encounter, Machine Goodfellow had not been activated. Yet Moko and Amara had been present. Teppei had therefore deduced that a designer child was there. Akari pointed out that Hana could predict the flow of Orgone energy. Despite that, Machine Goodfellow had not been activated. She theorized that something else had been using the Orgone energy. Pitt sensed that something was distinctly different from every previous time. Everyone pulled back the curtains and found Daichai sound asleep. Hana suddenly walked over and kissed him on the lips. She smiled, wanting to wish him good night. Then she lay down in her own bed, pulled the covers over herself, and went to sleep. Over at the underground fighting arena, the tense mech announced the next two contestants, Baku and Devil. In an instant, the bell rang and Devil charged forward. But Baku threw a single devastating punch that buckled his legs and sent him crashing down. Devil had been knocked out in just 10 seconds. Below in the stands, the crowd cheered and pumped their fists. Outside, Kumiko urged him not to keep doing this. She insisted that Baku did not have to follow that man's orders. But he would not listen to her. She embraced his head, heartbroken. He reminded her that he was drenched in sweat. Baku also pointed out that Kumiko already had a fiancé. She pulled out a keychain and insisted it would help him sleep better. Baku reached out and took it. But right after, someone arrived and demanded that Kumiko leave. Out on the streets, the four of them were walking together. The two girls were eating ice cream again. Daichai put his hands on his hips and reminded them they were not here to play. Akari cheerfully insisted that having fun was just as important. Behind them, the sound of bells suddenly rang out. A happy couple was getting married. Teppei and Akari suddenly asked Daichai if he had ever kissed anyone. Their expressions turned suspicious, recalling the scene of Hana kissing Daichai the night before. Hana remarked how happy the bride and groom looked. Akari worried that if the Kill T gang appeared, everyone would die. Daichai declared he would never let that happen. Rita called to report that she had found something interesting. There was an illegal underground arena in this city. They organized unlicensed fights where spectators gambled on the winner. Akari decided they would deal with this matter. That evening, the four of them dressed elegantly and headed to the underground arena Rita had described. They were stopped because they were minors. Akari boldly declared she was there to learn. Then she produced a thick wad of cash. The security guard quickly stepped aside. Up on the fighting platform, the Mick was hosting the event. Tonight's match was between Gaimrock and Baku. Someone turned and asked who they would bet on. Akari strode up confidently and asked about tonight's odds. She then threw down a large sum of money. The moment the bell sounded, Gaimrock drew a knife and slashed wildly at Baku. Baku struck hard against Gaimrock's wrist, sending the blade flying. Kumiko watched from the stands, overwhelmed with worry. Baku then drove a powerful uppercut into Gaimrock's chin, sending the man tumbling off the platform. Baku emerged victorious. Suddenly, Amara appeared on the fighting floor. Gaimrock assumed he was a new challenger. Daichai glanced over and signaled to Teppei. After a brief exchange, Amara easily overpowered Baku. He whispered a few words into his ear. Baku then struggled to break free from the chokehold. He was drenched in sweat, visibly strained, demanding that Amara stay away from him. The arena was suddenly struck by an earthquake. Moko understood clearly that his heart was causing space itself to tremble. After a while, Amara vanished from the arena. He had already run outside. Amara was disappointed to see that Baku was not among those who chased after him. The man leading the group quickly drew a gun and asked if Amara remembered him. Zin immediately recognized the name, Kariya. He then grinned and pointed out that the steel pipes propped against the wall could be very dangerous. A moment later, Kariya regained consciousness and opened his eyes wide. His face was smeared with fresh blood. The group now suspected their target was in that arena. Teppei told everyone to return there tomorrow. Daichai added that this time, Akari would stay home. She suddenly discovered a piece of news about some incident. On the other side, Kumiko jolted awake from her bed. She wearily opened the door and stepped outside. Her father was already sitting there waiting. Meanwhile, Baku sat by the city river, lost in deep thought. Inside the truck, Moko recounted meeting Baku the previous night. However, he had quickly run away. Amara cautioned that Baku's fighting skills were on par with his own, if not superior. She concluded that rushing onto the fighting stage had been a mistake. Amara wanted to settle things today. Moko suggested luring Baku outside. Zin was looking into the Magus incident. He turned and revealed that he had used his powers to kill someone last night. But Kariya was still alive. Rita was stunned to hear about the earthquake from the night before. After hearing the account, she deduced it was connected to the designer children. Rita reported that according to her investigation, the arena was involved in the illegal trafficking of young boys. Teppei affirmed that Daichai also possessed a special ability. He could sense the terrifying presence of the Kill T gang. Daichai smiled and explained that it was the power of the Livelaster. In the waiting room, Baku asked about Kumiko's condition. She stressed that even when she woke up, the nightmares still followed her. Kumiko's fiancé was Haruhiko. Baku only reminded her that the engagement had been her father's decision. Kumiko understood perfectly that her father saw people as nothing more than tools. She despised him for trafficking children. Then Kumiko felt a pang of guilt toward herself, because Baku had been bought by her at that time. She then asked him to show her the old magic trick again. When she was little, she had burst into tears because her father had found the only photograph of her mother and torn it apart. But Baku had gathered the torn pieces, held them between his palms, and a light appeared. The photograph was restored. This time, Kumiko wanted him to use the trick on a playing card. She suddenly realized it was more than just a magic trick. Elsewhere, Rita was taking Teppei to the shooting range, but he did not feel that hitting the target was anything to be proud of. Yet Daichai could not manage even that. He admitted he had never practiced shooting before. Rita suggested Daichai try using the Livelaster next time. He quickly summoned it. Through this, she also realized that Daichai was not the one firing it. The Livelaster was using him to fire on its own. Daichai insisted he did not feel the Livelaster controlling him. Teppei shared the same sensation. Rita smiled, confident that this was their unique ability. She suddenly received a phone call. Afterward, she informed them that Machine Goodfellow would appear tonight. For now, they could only count on Daichai. Kariya walked in and declared this would be the last time. Baku would appear in the arena tonight, and he wanted the fighter to earn as much money as possible. That evening, Daichai walked into the hallway and encountered Baku. He spoke up, warning Daichai that this hallway was restricted to authorized personnel. Tonight, Baku had to face the giant Rams. Despite Rams pulling out 2 wooden swords, Baku dispatched him with ease. Daichai noticed that something about Baku was different from a normal person. When Baku entered the resting room, Kariya and his men were already waiting inside. He ordered one of them to press a gun against Baku's head. Suddenly, the voice of young Lady Kumiko rang out. Zin had already bound her hands. Amara stepped down and proposed that if Baku agreed to their terms, she would be released. Moko approached and suddenly kissed Baku. His eyes flew open as he awakened. Kumiko was released. Suddenly, a white car pulled up from behind. A hand holding a gun reached out from the window. Kumiko immediately stepped behind Baku to shield him. She was struck by a bullet. Katia stepped out of the car, his jaw dropping in shock. Fortunately, Kumiko was still alive. Baku looked at her in his arms, his heart breaking. Akari once again brought up the Magus incident. A ship belonging to the Asanoda family had exploded. When the ship blew up, the entire Asanoda family had been aboard. Yet no one had died. Hana suddenly spoke up, explaining that someone's emotions had triggered their energy. On that day, Kumiko had brought a bomb onto the ship. She wanted to press the button to stop her father's child trafficking. The entire ship had caught fire, but Baku had arrived just in time. Back in the present, Kumiko was in tears. She reached up and touched his face, wanting to be freed from this nightmare. The men who had attacked Kumiko vanished. Amara turned and looked on, puzzled. Moko then explained that when the Magus exploded, everyone aboard had truly died. Baku had resurrected every single one of them. Before disappearing completely, Kumiko told him to live well. Baku clenched his fists, his heart torn with anguish. Now he was consumed by hatred, wanting to devour everything. He immediately activated Machine Goodfellow. On the other side, the Earth engine was quickly launched. Daichai flew straight to Baku's location. Baku seemed to completely overpower Daichai. Amara grinned smugly, warning that if Daichai kept running, time would surely run out. Baku grew more frenzied as he had nothing left to lose. When the two collided, a massive explosion erupted. The one who ultimately claimed victory was Daichai. He returned to base feeling somewhat guilty for having damaged the Earth engine again. Moko approached, wanting to touch Baku's keychain. He snapped at her with a sharp warning. The next day, Akari arrived at the base in a strange outfit. It turned out Pitts had predicted there would be no activity for the next 3 days. She was thrilled and wanted everyone to go on a trip. Rita asked whether Akari understood the current situation, but Akari was adamant about taking a break together. Rita asked Daichai for his opinion. He explained that it was currently summer vacation for students. Rita reluctantly accepted that the kids needed some rest. She agreed to let them go on a getaway, but on the condition that they stay in contact at all times. Over at the factory, the Machine Goodfellows belonging to the two had finally been repaired. Cube complained to Pac about Moko and Amara's slow progress. Pac insisted the current method was the most effective. Cube then conceived the idea of controlling humans directly. He reminded Pac that the only thing he could control was Pac itself. He held up a remote with an emergency shutdown button. Suddenly, Amara's voice rang out, confirming that Pac had not been lying. Moko added that Satsuna's capsule was also gone. Peter and Tsutomu had completed a new engine prototype. Peter guessed that Tsutomu's plan was not simply interception. Tsutomu turned and asked what Alonzo had said about it. Peter relayed that they had requested more time. The group of 4 finally arrived at the hotel. Akari handed each of them a room key. They went to open their respective rooms. Daichai opened his door and was stunned by how spacious it was. But as he walked deeper inside, he broke into a cold sweat. He realized in horror that his room and Hana's were connected. He guessed this was Akari's doing. Hana turned, walked away, tossed her dress onto a chair, and headed straight for the bath. Daichai leaped onto the bed and hugged a pillow, desperately trying to calm himself down. Hana sank into the hot bath. In her own room, Akari was imagining the frantic messages Daichai must be sending. After her bath, Hana suddenly walked into his room. But she only wanted to wish Daichai good night. Even so, it gave him a terrible fright. A while later, Daichai crept over to check whether she was asleep. In the middle of the night, he was jolted awake. Hana was sitting right beside him. Daichai panicked. He crawled closer and realized she was weeping. When he reached out his hand, she suddenly stood and ran back to her room. The next morning, everyone ran out to the beach. Hana was splashing in the water while the other 3 lounged on shore. Akari turned and asked Daichai about what had happened, leaving Teppei confused. Daichai admitted he was struggling to keep his composure. He guessed that Hana must hate him. Across the way, someone suddenly approached Hana about doing some modeling. Akari sprang from her chair in anger and went to rescue Hana. Teppei assured Daichai that Hana did not hate him. He revealed that she often came by and kissed Daichai while he slept. Daichai grew worried, remembering Hana crying the night before. Akari and Hana were bathing in the public bath. Hana confessed that she truly liked Daichai. On the other side, Cube had gone out to a luxurious restaurant with his secretary, Moko, and Amara. He already knew they had deliberately damaged Machine Goodfellow. Cube demanded to know what they had used the fuel for. Amara calmly explained they had been staging mock battles, but Cube cut them off. He stressed that Machine Goodfellow was not their toy. From now on, they were forbidden from using them without permission. A short while later, Pac informed the two of them. They still needed to make use of Cube for a while longer. Amara was thoroughly annoyed with the man. Pac warned that there was a bigger concern, Globe's independent strike force. Every time they attacked, they were thwarted. Suddenly, Moko had an idea. She wanted to use the satellite vessel built for escaping into space, but if it were to crash onto Tangashima, everything would change. It would blow the island apart and create serious trouble for Cube. Both Akari and Teppei were disappointed about the situation between Hana and Daichai. Teppei stated plainly that when one of them kissed another person, they could sense that person's thoughts. Tonight, Hana was once again sitting beside Daichai's bed, sobbing. He woke gently and asked her why. Hana confessed that she had been thinking it would be better to just kill him. Daichai leaned in, wanting to kiss her, but Hana suddenly refused. She was afraid he would discover her true nature. Just then, an urgent call came in from Rita, ordering them to return. Cube had also received emergency news. Legacy had lost control and was plummeting toward Earth. Everywhere, chaos was erupting. Rita screamed that there was no time left. At that moment, Hana rushed outside, alarming Daichai. He chased after her to the beach. A strange, powerful light radiated from around her. Everyone suddenly detected a high-density heat source. Hana quickly pointed up at the sky. Enormous waves from the open sea surged upward and struck Legacy. It disintegrated within the massive torrent. Afterward, she ran away from Daichai once more. News of the incident flooded social media. Tsutomu raised the problem of what they would do without Hana. Rita was worried because she was the only one who could predict the enemy's movements. Akari believed that if Hana knew something, she would surely contact them right away. Tsutomu feared that if the news spread, more enemies would target her. Akari asked why Daichai had not stopped Hana. Amara speculated that the enemy was struggling with energy. Moko stressed they were in the same predicament. Their most urgent task was to bring Setsuna back. Amara asked Moko to locate Setsuna. She immediately got to work. At the base, everyone learned new information. The royal bloodline of the planetary gears had the ability to control orgone energy. Hana could fire the Livelaster because she had been created using royal elements. Daichai emphasized that the most important thing was that they had no idea where Hana had gone. Akari insisted that searching blindly would accomplish nothing. Meanwhile, Hana was walking to a temple with Pitts. Suddenly, it jumped off her head. It had found the squirrel Trumpet, whom they had met before. Hana then spotted Setsuna sitting nearby, sketching. The girl admitted she needed money, so she had taken to drawing for people. Hana candidly shared her own situation. Just then, she looked up and saw Moko and Amara approaching. Cube was sitting and analyzing data from previous battles. He wanted to uncover the relationship between orgone energy and the Kill T gang. Long ago, Cube had received a sudden phone call from Kanda. Before taking his own life, Kanda had warned Cube to be careful. He left one final message: he had been set up. On the other side, Hana and Setsuna were running in a panic. The other two calmly scanned their surroundings. After a while, the girls unfortunately hit a dead end. Hana handed Pitts to Setsuna and asked her to take care of it. Setsuna did not want to. But then the girl hid in a corner while Hana stepped out. At that moment, Amara caught up, seething with anger. He grabbed her shoulder roughly and dragged her backward. Pitts could not hold back and lunged straight at him. But Amara cruelly hurled it against the wall. Hana clutched it to her chest in anguish. Setsuna quickly grabbed her hand and pulled her onward. Amara's ear, which Pitts had bitten, was now bleeding profusely. Cube asked Pac about the connection between those two and the Kill T gang, but Pac refused to reveal the true answer. It then released a cloud of smoke throughout the room. Cube, furious, quickly pressed the emergency shutdown button, but it had no effect whatsoever. Pac finally revealed its true face. Cube no longer had any chance to fight back. He collapsed, and the install device suddenly appeared. Akari announced she had picked up Hana's signal. Rita gently reminded her to follow Daichai's orders. Hana reported that Pitts had been injured, meaning they could no longer anticipate the enemy's actions from today onward. Hana recounted how Amara had appeared. Teppei and Akari decided to follow Daichai. fearing it would be too dangerous for him to go alone. Hana still believed Amara's target was herself. She told Setsuna to stay put. Hana clutched pits and ran outside. Amara furiously pursued her. She fled in terror toward the beach. Right at that moment, Daichai arrived just in time. She bowed her head guiltily and apologized. Suddenly, Daichai stepped close to Hana. But on the other side, the one truly being pursued was Setsuna. Moko suddenly snatched Trumpet from her hands. Meanwhile, Cube approached his secretary and kissed her. On the beach, Daichai also leaned in and kissed Hana. Tears quietly streamed down her face. Amara was kissing Setsuna to restore her memories. Afterward, the two of them quickly knelt at the girl's feet. But first, Setsuna wanted to hear more about all of this. Amara proposed they meet in Machine Goodfellow. Hana was anxious about Daichai discovering her true nature, but she was surprised to find he was not bothered at all. He smiled and thanked her for saving the island. Akari and Teppei stood behind a tree, having witnessed everything. Suddenly, Teppei noticed a flash of light. He rushed out to warn Daichai. Daichai urged Hana to take pits and hide. He and Teppei stayed, quickly drawing their livelasters. Akari called headquarters to report that Machine Goodfellow had appeared. Yet Rita had received no signal. Akari announced that the Earth engine and nebula had also been deployed. Rita immediately launched both machines into the sky. Moko was thrilled to see Hana running. The two of them fired repeatedly but could not land a hit. Just then, the Earth engine and nebula arrived. The two pilots quickly climbed inside, but Hana was unfortunately captured and held hostage to threaten them. The enemy used her as a shield while relentlessly attacking. Hana's eyes completely changed, blazing with resolve. She summoned the Livelaster into her hand. Hana leaped free and opened fire. Moko panicked and tried to steer her machine away, but in the end, she was still hit. Amara stared wide-eyed in disbelief. Setsuna watched the entire scene from a distance. The four young heroes emerged safely.